Good afternoon, everybody. I hope that you've enjoyed your afternoon, whatever you've chosen. And it's a bit like when people have chosen different dishes at a restaurant and you don't know whether theirs was better than yours or not. But that's all part of the enjoyment of it, isn't it? This is simply briefly to welcome you back now and to this conversation, which has a simple question: what did a church choir do for me? But actually just expands slightly into exploring the connections and the careers of these two wonderful musicians, James and Hannah, that Carl Jackson were delighted is here to chair this panel. So on behalf of us all, can we give them a very warm welcome?
Okay. Good afternoon. What did a church choir ever do for me? The life of the parish chorister can open the doors to many futures. Not all of these are musical, but some are. Two internationally renowned singers, Hannah Davey and James Gilchrist, share their experiences and journeys. Hannah's performances take her across the UK and Europe, performing song recitals, oratorio, and orchestral concerts. Notable solo engagements include regular performances with the Orchestra of St John's, including the My Music series at Wigmore Hall, London, performances of Bach and Handel with the Musical and Amicable Society, a production of The Merchant of Venice at the Royal Shakespeare Company, and song recitals in France, Sweden, and Denmark. Hannah is in demand as an oratorio soloist and has performed at many venues, including St John Smith Square and King's Place, London, the abbeys of Dorchester, Malmesbury, and Tewkesbury, and her hometown of Cheltenham. Recordings include Mozart's Requiem with the Orchestra of St John's and William Hayes' The Fall of Jericho with the Corelli Ensemble. James Gilchrist, recognised as the finest evangelist of his generation. No, you don't. James is one of the UK's leading tenors, whose extensive repertoire embraces work spanning many centuries. He is an enthusiastic and prolific exponent of lieder and enjoys nothing better than putting together interesting and challenging recital programmes. His impressive discography includes the Vaughan Williams Songs of Travel, Schubert and Schumann song cycles, Finzi, Bach, and Britten. James, how did you come to join a church choir?
Yes, thank you, Carl. It's lovely to be here, by the way, and thank you very, very much for having Hannah and me to come and talk. Well, yes, I joined a church, started singing, really, because of a church choir. And obviously, it's ended up being my life, really, singing. But yeah, when I was at my primary school, I was brought up in Banbury, between, just north of Oxford. And the main parish church in Banbury had a choir of children and adults, those days all boys. And the choir master came to our primary school and drummed up support, and I like mug that I am, put my hand up and ended up singing in the choir. So that's how I came to be a singer at all. And I sang with that choir for a couple of years, I think. And then the choir master, very bravely, really, because it meant getting rid of me, because he obviously thought I was quite good. And he said, why don't you apply for a choristership at one of the Oxford colleges? So I did. So I ended up going to New College in Oxford as a boy chorister. And so that's really very much how I came to be a singer at all, through singing in church choirs. And I have a great deal to be thankful for.
Hannah?
Well, I've come from a different route, and one that I think we will talk about more through this chat today. But I didn't sing in a church choir as a child, and my musical education was instrumental, so I played the cello and played in orchestras, and that sort of is how I learnt my musicianship, I suppose. But my family is very musical, and my grandfather was a priest, so it was within our family, and sort of the music was within our family, but I did miss out on that experience of regularly singing in a church choir as a child. As I've gotten older, I've done more. In my sixth form, I sang in the school chapel choir, and then since then, I sing in churches a lot, and I love it. But I found a different way, and I think, well, we'll talk later about maybe what I've missed along the way, but also what I now love about singing in churches.
James, what for you was the first significant musical milestone to which it was led? That's being in a church choir.
Yes, I've been thinking about this one. I think in my sort of musical journey since, I seem to have made, without really meaning to, something of a speciality of singing Baroque music, German Baroque music, particularly Handel and Bach. And when I think in common with a lot of parish church choirs, my first choir sang on a Sunday for the Eucharist, and that was all that it did. Once a week, we would join the main service. I don't even remember doing weddings and funerals and things, which surprises me a bit, because I think that's quite often the case. But I was very small and my memory is very poor. And so it's quite possible that we did, and I've just forgotten. But anyway, when I became a chorister at one of the Oxford colleges, suddenly the volume of music that I was required to do ratcheted up quite a lot. And I was performing every day and learning endless streams of different styles of music from here, there, and everywhere. And once a year, we would perform one of the Passions by J.S. Bach, with the choir singing the choir parts. And, I remember being little in it and looking up to all the people doing all the solo parts, and now I'm doing all the solo parts, and there are a lot of little people looking up to me, and it's a rather nice circularity, that. So I think that really would be, in some ways, one of the first sort of milestones. It was being exposed to those larger scale works, big sort of, big works of the classical music literature, like the Messiah, the St. John Passion, Haydn's Creation, that, well, I'm not that old, but 50 years ago, these would have been really common currency amongst everybody, really. A lot of choral societies doing them. And until I joined this choir, I don't think I was exposed to those as much as I would have liked to be. And I have never forgotten it, actually. And there's something about being in a performance of a great work of art with a large number of people in one place at a meaningful time of year, doing a passion in the run-up to Easter, which is impossible to underestimate, really. I mean, to overestimate. It's a hugely important part of what has made me who I am, I think. That sense of coming together, of making music in a group with a great work of art. And I think it's those that really stand out for me from my childhood years.
Thank you. Hannah?
Yes, no, I think I just agree completely about the big works. But something, again, that I've had to come into from a different route. I've come into those as a soloist, and I have sung the choir parts too since then. But that depth of understanding, and particularly, again, as a child, I sang the Matthew Passion on Easter Saturday this year, and that ripieno part, just the experience of coming in as this little troop of children, and they're so small, and it's such a big work, and that experience to sing, and just even that opening chorus is so extraordinary, and something I wish I'd had when I was younger, but yeah, I still just am in awe every time I sing any of that music in an amazing setting.
James, did you intend to pursue a career in music when you joined your...
No, absolutely not. It never occurred to me. And in fact, we were talking earlier, and I was just thinking most of the people whom I sang in church choirs with have absolutely not gone into careers in music. And I think that's a hugely important part of why music being sort of a normal part of life, just going to church and doing music, is really important, because it exposes a huge number of people to an understanding and a love of music and its value in kind of worship, but also in sort of broader life, where, you know, it doesn't have to become your career or what you spend all your life doing for you to realise that it's a hugely important part of life. No, I mean, don't you think that...
Absolutely. Well, we were talking earlier because I've got 2 young children, and they don't sing in school. And I know you were talking, there was discussion earlier today or yesterday about this, but it still just blows my mind that they're not singing and they're not learning those hymns. We, you know, because I'm aware of it, and my children do sing that music and they do sing in choirs, but it's, you know, all the other 400 children in their primary school aren't experiencing that unless their parents are creating that opportunity for them. And I think there's something you're missing something. Not just, there is the music, but there's also the collaborative nature of singing, yes, the joy of it, we were talking about teamwork, weren't we, and creating something together. And also learning how to create an atmosphere, how to perform to an audience. There's so many angles that even if singing is not going to be your future, are so positive for any career, really, that you go into in the future.
I remember, to answer your question a little bit, Carl, sorry, I'm not very good at answering questions, but I tend to ramble. But I went into a totally different career. I went into medicine, and I was a doctor for a while. And I'll just mention 2 things. The one that surprisingly, I think my musical education actually was not without usefulness in medicine. Medicine and music are essentially about communicating between human beings. In medicine, you're trying to, I suppose, at the end of the day, you're trying to help people understand how to live with the medical problems that they have. I think it's a big misunderstanding of medicine that the aim of medicine is to cure everybody. I don't think it is. I think it's to help people to live with the problems that life has thrown at them. And actually, I think music, to some extent, shares some of that, certainly, that through the medium of music, we can experience ways of communicating with each other and of understanding life in general, which is more profound than meets the eye, I think, and actually can be more helpful than sometimes you imagine. I do a lot of lieder singing, and I was very lucky to have a new piece written for me quite recently, which was a big cycle of 7 poems by Tennyson. And these poems come from Tennyson's In Memoriam, which is a sequence of poems that he wrote in response to having suffered a bereavement at the age of, well, very tender age of 22, I think he was, when his friend Arthur Hallam died all of a sudden. It's historical, it doesn't matter. This series of poems is about the progress of grief, of what happens to us. And through the poems, of which there are 100 and so, you know, you get anger, you get sadness, you get fury, you get failure to understand what's going on with life. And this wonderful composer called Jonathan Dove had set these 7 of these poems to music, and I was just performing them in the museum in Leicester with our pianist, and we came off at the end of the concert, and we're just in the green room, And a lady came up to me and said, I lost my husband a year ago, and it's only through this musical experience that I've finally been able to understand what's been going on. It moved her more than anything else had in that year. And a little lesson to me was, you never know who's listening and what effect you might have. So that's one little story. The other is that I remember assisting, I did a concert in Aldborough, and somebody came up afterwards and said, James, you won't remember who I am. And I looked at him, and he looked vaguely familiar, a bit older than me, and he said, I'm a consultant urologist, and I trained you when you were a medical student, and I used to have to tell you off for humming during my operations. And now look, he said, I'm having to pay a fortune to listen to you. It's quite fun. Anyway, so no, I didn't intend to pursue music as a career.
Thank you, James. Hannah, did you intend to
did
pursue
I?
a career in music?
I don't think there was a great deal of intention. There wasn't a thunderbolt moment where I thought, that's it. But it just became my life. I think it just became the thing that I was always drawn back to. It was where I felt myself. It was where I felt connected to other people. And also I love your days are never the same. You will never have the same day twice as a musician, and just you will meet such wonderful, interesting people, and experience amazing places. And I think it's sort of just, I still feel very lucky that I'm doing it, and surprised still. Sometimes I wake up and think, what am I doing today? And it's wonderful. So yes, there was no great plan, but yeah, life is...
I think you and I share music having been a kind of normal thing in our backgrounds,
absolutely.
don't we? Because your dad is a singing teacher.
Yeah, my dad's a musician, and yes, there's just always been music, and it's always been a joyful thing and something that's, been part of our day-to-day.
And I wonder whether, do you think, Carl, that has changed over the years? That, certainly amongst children, we were talking about lack of music in schools, that for children, and this is why church choir can be so important, music has ceased to be a normal part of life, and has become more specialised. Do you think this? He's meant to be asking the questions, and it's not fair.
Oh my gosh. Music is still a part of life, but for so many people it's just listening to music with their pods in their ears and headphones. It's actually making music with other people. That, I think, is far more important. It really is. And it does go on. It does go on. I can think of so many successful schools, orchestras in various regions of the country where this is flourishing, and music of all genres. But I'm sorry. It's just the idea of just the pods and it's just being yourself.
So I suppose, yes, that lack of communality, which, of course, when we talk about music in church, that is emphatically what is not being done. It is very much a communal activity. It's not isolated in your pod. Very good point. Sorry, I've interrupted your question. Sorry.
That threw me, right? As for the question, indeed. Could you describe how your experience as a chorister has shaped you?
Well, I think so, yes. I suppose, what did I learn as a chorister or as a musician in a church choir? What I find astonishing is I think I learned an enormous amount without really noticing that I did, if you see what I mean. Particularly because I was a child, and I think it's easy to talk about children in church choirs, and of course church music is often adults, and But I think when you're dealing with little children who still are involved in church, they learn so much just apparently by sort of osmosis. I was doing a Passion in King's, Cambridge, just before Easter, and you watch along the line of all those choristers who are just astonishing. But after a while, you realise that there's only about 3 of them who are actually doing anything and doing any of the singing, and the rest of them are all sort of staring into space, picking their nose, sort of waving to mum, and actually, but they are learning, and without actually realising it, you learn. So what are the crafts one learns in that? I mean, I think a lot. So for me, there's the practical aspect. So particularly in schools these days, so overlooked, of the literature of music, how to write and read music, which I think is absolutely critical and crucial to life as a musician. And I mean, can you imagine being a writer without knowing how to hold a pen or how to write? I mean, it just seems ridiculous. And yet we're expected to be able to be musicians without being able to read music. And I just think this is, to my mind, nonsense. But, I know we can, make sounds, but the craft of learning how to write it down and how to read it suddenly opens up vistas without which you are stuck. So simply the craft of learning how to do it, how to read it. The second thing, I suppose, is just being exposed to endless repertoire. Music from the Renaissance to all the time a different piece, and I love that. And the third thing is a very practical one, that particularly when I was in the more sort of often performing choir, there's a sense that you have to make a performance in half an hour. Here's your new piece of music, and tomorrow it'll be a different piece of music. We all sort of dream that as performers we will create a perfect gem and then present it to the audience. And of course, life is never like that. You've got to get on there and do it. And that is a really valuable lesson. And I think we touched on it just a moment ago. The other thing that I really learned was how wonderful it is to make music together. That as a big group of people, we are more than the sum of our parts. That you can touch people and move people in a way that you never could as an individual through this wonderful medium of music.
We were talking before as well about how, having not grown up with that, what have I missed? And I've been considering it, and I think a lot is the answer. Something I feel is so ingrained in church singing is that deep understanding of how music fits throughout the church year and how it fits within the calendar and how the music works within services, which coming into it later, I've gathered the information, but just that really confident understanding of that, I think, is something that, again, it's this just by osmosis, you just soak it up. And we were talking as well about this, the real joy of, as well as making music together, but intergenerational music, within a church choir, there's all people, all ages, and you're making friendships, really, and with people from different different ages, and how powerful that is, that community building of really knowing your community and all the different ages within it. And then another one I just was considering about is just how singing in a church choir offers you a free musical education, and how special that is. And again, where music can feel, it's something that you have to have money to access. You want your children to have music lessons, that costs a lot of money. But actually, singing in a church choir, whether it's a parish church choir, as a chorister, where you might even be paid yourself to sing, gives you a really good musical education, all that sight reading that you're talking about and the repertoire, for free, which is fantastic. So yeah, lots of aspects that, looking back, I'm sad I missed, but equally glad that the door was still open to sing in the church now, and as an adult, and I've found my way into church singing, so it wasn't the only way, but but there were aspects that I think I missed.
There's just one thing I wanted to add to what you were saying, James. You were talking about the craft of music in terms of the writing and so on and so forth, which I take totally. But putting on my school teacher's hat, I'm aware of other traditions and genres where it's not written down. I'm thinking of jazz, for example, where you get wonderful improvisation and so on and so forth, but it's not written down. You just have a sort of a few chords, and it all goes on up there. And then you've got your ensemble. You've got the piano and the sax and the trumpet and so on and so forth, blah blah blah, and you do your break and so on and so forth. So yeah.
And to go back to the topic of our conversation, what has a church choir ever done for me? I think the fact that these days music in church is, my own background is very much in the kind of C of E tradition of classical church music, and I've carried on doing that. But nowadays, of course, there are lots of different musical traditions that are given expression throughout church services. And I think, certainly for me to end up doing anything improvisatory, I would immediately throw up my hands in horror. But thank God there are places where it can be done. And I think it's wonderful. There's courses for horses. Or is it horses for courses?
Horses.
Well, I suppose you could do it either way, couldn't you?
So, James, when did you first become aware of the RSCM?
The RSCM, I became aware of it from my very Banbury Parish Church Choir, because we were a parish church choir which had all of those medals and ribbons, which I was desperate to get. And children are very good at that, aren't they? You just dangle a little medal in front of them and they'll, yes, I want one of those, and they'll do anything for it. And I was definitely, yes, that was me, mug, yes. So yeah, absolutely from day one. And I think it's just magnificent. And my own children went through, we've got a local parish church where there's a choir, and all of them to some extent joined in, and certainly and that parish church choir also uses these sort of teaching methods, which I think are really useful, because it's I think it's quite daunting sometimes for a church organist who maybe hasn't done any kind of, you've been appointed to a place and you might be able to play the organ. That might be something that has enabled you to get the job. But actually, how to teach children to learn music might not be something that you know very much about. And actually, to have this scheme is incredibly useful. And I think it's a wonderful thing.
Yes, and I've again come across the RSCM through a teaching role. So I teach and I've taught children, within church choirs. I've gone in and done workshops with those church choirs, maybe who were feeling that they didn't have the specialist skills about singing technique, and were able to ask me to come in to help with that, which has been great. And then working individually with students as well of mine on the awards, and they are really great. I think they're wonderful, and the children really love them. So yes, that's how I've experienced RSCM.
I experienced the RSCM through being in my parish church choir in Harrow, and I remember the light blue and the dark blue and the red and the card, and signed off for your religious training, the musical training, and so on and so forth. And it meant so much to me as a youngster. I passed the light blue, now onto the dark blue. So I've experienced that as well, and I'm immensely grateful for that. We've heard the slogan, if you can read this, thank a teacher. Thinking of your formative years and changing the slogan to, if you can sing, whom would you thank?
It's a lovely question. Yes, I've been thinking about this, and I think the answer is the person who recruited me, it sounds like for MI5, doesn't it, into my first choir, without any question, actually. He was an extraordinary man, was able to build up what was quite a unpromising church choir into something that really was quite good, I think. He wasn't there for very long, alas. Stephen Bell, he was called, and he came to our primary school and persuaded a few of us to come, and we came. Do you know, the one lasting memory I have of my days in that choir is being told off by the vicar for talking during his sermon. I still remember it, the terror, because I was just I think I was playing noughts and crosses with the person next to me. And he turned around, he said to the congregation, "Excuse me a moment," and turned around and then gave it. Anyway, I shouldn't have shared that with you. That's not fair, is it? But no, so it's Stephen Bell who, and I was very lucky because I met him again quite recently. Quite by chance, he came to a recital I was doing, and so I was able, not just to say here, thank you to him, but actually to his face, thank you to him. So that was really wonderful.
And I was also thinking about it, and I think it's my dad. And I think the reason, again, it's just this, that music was always a place of joy and of communication. And I go over to his house, and my mum always says, "Oh, you're having a chat again, are you?" And we're singing, and that's how we communicate. We talk as well, but it's deeper somehow when we make music together. And also this thing of opening me and my sisters, our ears to all sorts of music, and making it something that was, again, as we said, part of everyday life. And I think that's such a special gift to give anybody, that music can be, and making music together can be just normal. And I'm doing it now with my children. They sing all the time. Not always my choice of song, but that's okay. But music is just what we do. And my husband, who's not a musician, is getting on board too, which is nice. He's singing lots and not being so aware of himself all the time. I think sometimes singing can feel something that, you're vulnerable, letting your voice out and communicating with people. And again, by just it becoming part of your life, and that's the joy of singing in a choir, of course, is that you can just try it out. You can see, what happens, and you can listen to start with. As James was saying, you can be part of this group and ease your way into it, and then suddenly you might say, well, there's a little solo available. I might just try for that, and it can give you a whole wonderful experience at any age. That's not just at all for children, it's for anybody. And I teach adults as well during my week, and I have lots of people who sing in choirs who come and say, I'd love a bit more confidence. And really, it doesn't take a lot. Their musicianship is there. They understand what they want. It's just that little extra something of somebody saying, you sound great, keep going. But it's such a special thing that offers.
James, with the benefit of hindsight, what advice would you give to the choristers of today?
I think the one thing I would say is to appreciate what an enormous difference music can make to worship. And I was singing at the funeral of a friend's mum's funeral yesterday, and the number of people who came up afterwards and said, thank you so much for the music. I think music within worship and within liturgy can touch people, can move people, can make people feel more affected than almost anything else. And I think it is incredibly valuable. So that's what I would say to modern, current singers in choirs, is to realize what a special thing you are part of, that you are making an enormous difference to other people.
Yes, I don't think I have anything more to add. I think that's just absolutely it. So yes, he's hit the nail on the head.
Thank you both. I'm going to invite questions. If anybody has a question, and the roving mic will. Do you want one of these? Okay.
Thank you both. Church choirs are, in my experience, some of the best choirs for recruiting boys, especially with the Anglican tradition. But what the image I have, and I might be wrong, is that ends when their voice breaks, which I find a very negative term in itself. And then there's that gap between the end of being a chorister and the opportunity to be a choral scholar. So I guess the question is, what can church choirs do for boys who are in that gap? How do you make sure that they come back as choral scholars and then, vicar's choral and all of that?
Well, I think it's changing, and it's that. I think the most important thing is trying to include those voices. I teach a lot of changing voices, and yes, there is a time when the voice does, it changes, and maybe the range becomes smaller. But it's quite fascinating if you start as a treble. You just you can often slide your way down. And I think it's just that flexibility within choirs to allow boys to do what they can do and join in the bits they can do. And if they can't, if it doesn't feel comfortable, that's okay too. But if there's any opportunity to keep them involved, I think it has to be grasped. I understand if you're at the recording all the time level, and maybe you do have to say you need a little break. But for most day-to-day singing, I would say there's the opportunity for them to sing.
Yeah, and I feel there were kind of 2 points there. The first is about a boy's changing voice, and I think there used to be an orthodoxy that you should stop. And stop singing altogether. And I remember that when I was a boy, that was more or less what I was told. And I think that has gone out of the window now. People just say, keep going, just keep going. And I would, it sounds ghastly, but it doesn't really matter. Just keep going. But the other point that you raise is that historically, church choirs have been, particularly for children, for boys. That has really changed. And I think the opportunities for girls now are as good as they are for boys. And I think we should celebrate that. And there's lots and lots of wonderful girls' choirs and girls singing in choirs that goes on. I think the only danger is that boys being so useless about doing anything with girls, they'll stop altogether. But I think a lot of places are being very careful about either keeping the boys' choir separate from the girls or having a slightly different age group or that sort of thing. And it seems to work. And maybe there's a place in the country maybe for 1 or 2 boys' choirs still. But I think it's wonderful that there are so many opportunities for girls now too.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Looking around. It's a bit like an auction, looking for any.
James, I remember very vividly, I love it when you sing leader, but my most vivid memory of you is the evangelist in St. Albans Cathedral. And you walked about singing this difficult music, expressive but difficult music, as if you were reporting on something that you were actually watching. It was extremely moving. And I wondered what was going on in your head. Were you imagining the scene, or is it so familiar, the words?
Sorry. Thank you for asking that. I'm very glad you were there. Just for those who weren't there, I took part in a performance of Bach's St. Matthew Passion in St. Albans Cathedral, where it was with a local choral society, I think, wasn't it? And they had learned it all off by heart and staged the whole thing in a kind of semi-staged way. But you're right. Yes, my role as the evangelist was to, walk up to the person playing Jesus and to talk to him and then explain where he was going to go, and then to talk to the rabble here as they were roused and so on. And it was great fun. And I suppose I will answer your question by sort of broadening it a little bit, in that I think those pieces of music are the closest that Bach ever got to writing an opera, really. And I personally feel that they are deeply dramatic pieces, the Passions. And we tend to think of Bach's Passions as coming out of the blue, and they didn't at all. There was very much a tradition in the German-speaking world of intoning a passion story just in the lead up to Easter. And they gradually were getting more and more elaborate. And lots of composers have written passions. I think Bach's stand out because of their enormity and complexity, but they're not actually out of the ordinary except in their artistry. So I think that kind of dramatization of the gospel that they want to do is part of the sort of wish to explain to and to involve the congregation in the story that's going on.
Thank you. Looking around the room, any questions? Yes.
This isn't so much a question as a comment in reflection of something that James said about singing together, because for those of us who have moderate singing talents and can sing in big choirs, it is something that the amateur can do on the same stage as world-class people like James and Hannah.
And again, we come back to music being community and music being a joining thing for everybody. Absolutely.
Hannah and James, thank you so much. The session was, what did a church choir ever do for me? I think it's done a lot for all of us. Thank you both very much.